Greetings and a warm welcome to you. Today we're going to talk about blackjack. It happens to be one of my favorite games. All right, let's go ahead and refamiliarize ourselves with a couple of hands of blackjack. I'm going to go ahead and place a $10 wager here. We got an 8 and the dealer has a 6 up. So go ahead and hit. Now we've got a 10. Now we've got a 19. And the dealer busted. Our total of 19. The dealer's total, she got 23, which is a bust. Go ahead and play one more hand. So this time we got a 19, a king and a 9 adds up to 19. Dealer is showing 7. She'll stop at 17, so our 19 beats the 17. And so it goes. So what's important to understand about blackjack is the house advantage only comes about in one way. And that is that if both the player and the dealer bust, the player has to go first. If both the player and the dealer bust, the house wins. The house has already taken your money. And this can be contrasted with the advantages the player has. Now the house, the dealer, she's going to have to play by a fixed set of rules. But the player, he or she can play by any rules, any strategy that the player may wish. So first of all, blackjacks pay 3-2, which is a premium. If the dealer gets a blackjack, they'll just pick up your bet. But if you get a blackjack, they'll pay you 1.5 times your bet. And then as a player, you may strategically play as you desired, and this generally includes hitting, standing, doubling, or splitting. Plus, insurance is offered to you as a player as a separate side bet. We're going to find out in the basic strategy that we actually never make that bet, but it is offered, and as card counters, if we have information about the cards remaining to be played, we will occasionally make insurance. And this can be summarized in this table of just looking at, does the player bust, does the dealer bust? Obviously, there's just 4 possibilities. Player, yes, no. Dealer, yes, no. And you can see that things look symmetrical, except for the one case where if the player busts and the dealer busts, the house actually wins that situation. What is the basic strategy? How should we think about it? It's a strategy that optimizes your expectation. In other words, it's a strategy or a set of hitting and standing and doubling and splitting rules, what you should do in each situation that maximizes your expected value for the hand. That's the best way to think about it. And what we're going to do in the basic strategy is it's going to utilize our player total, what our current total is in our hand. It's going to check if there's a pair, and it's going to check whether we have a hard or a soft hand. But it's essentially going to use our total and the dealer's up card. Sometimes this basic strategy that's presented here, which is the most common way of presenting the basic strategy, is what's known as a total dependent basic strategy. Okay, let's take a quick look at the basic strategy here, and I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to remove myself. So across the top here is the dealer up card. So 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Remember 10 is 10 jack, queen, or king. They're all equivalent in blackjack. And then each row here is a particular player hand. So we have pairs, we have hard totals, and a hard total is a hand in which you either don't have an ace or the ace counts as 1. And then we have soft totals, and those are hands in which you do have an ace and it's counted as an 11. And in each situation, we have something that we are told to do by the basic strategy. We can hit, which is depicted in green because green means go. We want another card. Hit is an option. Stand is an option. Stand is shown in red because we're going to stop. We're not going to take any more cards. We can double in situations where we're going to tend to be aggressive. Doubling means we're going to put more money out, and we're only going to take one more card. And then the fourth option is P, which is shown here as splitting. I'm using P because S is already used for stand, and P is shown in blue for splitting. And what that means is I'll put out another wager equal to the original. My pair of cards will then be split into 2 hands where one of the cards will be the first one in each hand. So for example, if we look at a pair of 9s here, and the dealer up card is a 6, the basic strategy says we should split. That is the correct strategy that maximizes our expected value. On the other hand, if we have a pair of 9s and the dealer has a 7 up, we should stand. So the correct strategy will be a function of what's in our hand, our total, as well as the dealer's up card. Well, I wanted to talk about dealer weakness and strength in terms of their up card. And so I wanted to show you this chart, which is taken from the book I wrote with Ken Fuchs called Knock-Out Blackjack. And what this shows is for a dealer up card of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, what the outcome is in terms of probabilities. And so what you can see here is for dealer up cards of 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, what we call the weak dealer up cards. The most likely outcome is for the dealer to bust, which is represented by that rightmost bar, and you can see it's easily the highest one. On the other hand, it never does reach 50%. So even though it's most likely the dealer will bust, it's not over 50%. It's not likely that the dealer will bust. It doesn't exceed 50%, but it is the most likely outcome if you compare the various outcomes the dealer can have. On the other hand, the first 5 charts can be contrasted here with the bottom right one, which is a dealer up card of a 7. And here you can see something interesting happening. Now the most likely outcome for the dealer is to end with a total of 17. 17 becomes the most likely outcome because the dealer stands on totals of 17 through 20. So if the dealer has a 10 as the down card and has the 17, he's going to stand. He's not going to keep drawing like he would if he had a 2 through 6. Now, I'm not going to show the rest of the charts, but as you might imagine, the ones for 8, 9, and 10 look quite similar to the one for 7, except that the most likely outcome becomes 18, 19, or 20, and the one for ace becomes interesting because the dealer has quite a good possibility of ending up with a blackjack and may end up with a 21 to boot, even if he doesn't have the blackjack. So when we say the dealer shows weakness, we mean the dealer has a 2 through 6 up and has the best chance, if you will, of busting. It's still not over 50%, however. And when the dealer shows strength, what we mean is the dealer has a 7 through an ace up, and his most likely outcome then is not to bust, but to end up with a total that may very well be 10 plus what he's showing you. So, okay, so how do we go about deriving the basic strategy? You've seen the chart, but where does that even come from, and how does someone go about knowing that that's correct? So we're going to look at only a couple of those entries. We're going to assume the dealer has an up card of a 6. And then we're going to look at player hard totals, 21 on down. And the way I approach this is I write software, a computer simulator, to play this game. And when it encounters a situation of the player has 21 and the dealer has a 6 up, what this special code does, which generates the basic strategy, is it doesn't it pretends like it doesn't know what it should do in this situation of 21 against 6. In other words, it will try to hit a certain percentage of those hands. It will stand on some. It will double on some if it's available. For example, double on any number of cards. And if it were available, it would even try to split. Now, obviously, you cannot split a hard total of 21, so that's why there's an X here. And you can see that if you hit a hard total of 21, you will necessarily bust. It's suicidal. And so your expected value is -1. You expect to lose your wager. On the other hand, if you stand, you might think your value is +1, but there's about an 8% chance that the dealer will draw to 21. And so there's about an 8% chance you'll push. So your expected value is actually about 0.92 units. And if you double, then I guess that's doubly suicidal if that's possible. And you actually would be losing 2 units. And so the computer just plays out the hand in these ways and calculates what the expected value is. And for 21 for us, we can kind of easily see what those values are, or, understand where they come from, because hitting is going to be -1 and standing it's going to be something close to 1. Then we drop down to 20. Let's say we have a hard 20. And the computer again is going to randomly decide how it plays that against a 6. Sometimes it'll hit. And obviously, if you hit a hard 20, most of the time you're going to bust unless you get an ace and you get lucky. And the expected value of that, you can see here. If you stand, the expected value is 0.7. If you double, it's -1.69. If you split, if you have the pair of tens and you can split, it's 0.57. So the greatest of these 4 is the optimal strategy. It's the best strategy for you to adopt. And you can see that I've highlighted it here in yellow. So with a 21, the best strategy is to stand. With a 20, it's to stand. With a 19, it's to stand. With an 18, something interesting happens. It's actually, if your 19 is a pair of nines against the 6, it's best to split them. Your expected value from splitting is to gain 0.4 units of your original wager, whereas if you stand, it's only to gain 0.29. So you actually make more money by splitting. And so the optimal strategy would be splitting if you can, if it's a pair of nines, otherwise you stand. And so on and so forth down this chart you see. And so what you see is pairs of nines, pairs of eights, pairs of sevens, and even pairs of sixes. It's best to split. And on the other hand, if you cannot do that, or if it's impossible to do that, then you should be standing. The other thing to notice here is that if I stand with a 16 or less, that these are all equivalent. And you can see they're slightly different here because these are actually simulation results. But conceptually, they're all worth the same amount. And that's because the dealer is going to draw to a total of 17 to 21. Always. He's always going to draw to 17, 18, 19, 20, or 21. So if you stop at something below 17, if you stop at a 16, or you stop at a 14, or a 12, or an 11, or you're Austin Powers and you stand on 5, those are all equivalent. The only way you're going to win, because the dealer for sure is going to hit until reaching 17 through 21. He's not going to stop just because you've stopped at 16 or less. He's going to try for 17 through 21, that window, that safe window. The only way you'll win if you stop at 16 or less is if the dealer busts. That's the only way you'll win. So when you stop at 16 or less, know that all those hands are equivalent. A 16 is just as good as a 10 if you've stopped, and your only chance of winning is if the dealer busts. So generally, we're going to be stopping on 16 or less only if the dealer is showing weakness of like a 2 through 6, that's the up card. But also, we're only going to be stopping if our next hit might bust. In other words, if we got 11 or less, those are free hits. Or if we've got a soft total that's not very good, like a soft 16 or even a soft 17, we're going to be hitting that because that's a free hit. You can't bust if you have a soft total. And this gives you a flavor of how the basic strategy is derived. And so what can be done is either once I know the values for 21, I can bootstrap those onto 20 in the sense of if I hit and get to a 21, now I know what those values are. Or the way my simulations tend to work is when I'm trying to derive a basic strategy for blackjack, or perhaps it's a variation of blackjack, where I need to rederive the basic strategy, or it might be a game that's unrelated to blackjack. But one of the approaches you can take is you can let the computer do what we're looking at here and decide what each of these plays should be. And then that's put into a basic strategy matrix, and you let the computer start playing with that basic strategy that you are proposing is the correct one. But as you're playing with that basic strategy, you're still occasionally swapping out these plays and letting the computer test hitting, standing, doubling, and splitting. And so then that way you can modify and converge and tweak your basic strategy to what's actually correct. And it usually just takes just a few iterations to do that. Quickly, things tend to converge to the basic strategy. But this is how the basic strategy can be derived. In terms of the basic strategy, one of the things I wanted to talk about too is the insurance calculation. So insurance pays 2 to 1. If the dealer has an ace up, you'll be offered insurance. You can bet half your bet, and they'll offer you the odds of 2 to 1. Now, this would be a fair bet because it's 2 to 1 odds. It would be a fair bet if your chance of winning was 1/3. In other words, 1/3 times plus 2 is the same as a 2/3 chance of losing times -1. Those would sum to 0. The actual probability of winning is roughly 4 in 13. And so the player's expectation is approximately -7.7%. In other words, then we take the opposite of that and we get the house advantage of 7.7%. And that's a fairly healthy house advantage. So the basic strategy is you never take insurance. And what is the basic strategy expectation? Basic strategy expectation, depending on the rules that you face, and we'll cover that shortly in this video, is going to be about -0.7% to 0.0%. So roughly -0.7% to about even. And the opposite of that is the house advantage. So the house advantage is going to be 0% to about 0.7%. And for those of you that are familiar with the house advantages in casino gaming or have seen some of my other videos, you'll notice that 0 to 0.7% is really low. And so for a player utilizing basic strategy, this is really among the most player-friendly games that a casino offers in terms of the pricing, or what we call the house. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the basic strategy and what it means and why we should be doing the things we do. So always split aces and eights is one of the adages that we know, and that happens to be true. Um, Twos through sevens, we're only going to be splitting generally here against weak dealer up cards. Against strong dealer up cards, we're just going to have to play those hands out and have to take the hit. In terms of hard totals, now these are totals where I either don't have an ace or the ace counts as one. So with a 17 or more, I'm just going to stand. It's not a great hand, but the risk is too high. If I hit, that I'll bust. And you can see there's a bifurcation here between a dealer up card of 6 or less, which we consider weak, and a dealer up card of 7 or more that we consider strong. If the dealer is showing strength, then even though we have what's known as a stiff total of 12 through 16, so the very next hit may bust for us. That's why it's referred to as a stiff total. We've got to take the hit because the dealer shows strength. On the other hand, with a stiff total, if the dealer shows weakness, we're generally going to be standing, with the sole exception being a 12 against a dealer 2 or 3. So in 11, there's a good chance we'll get a 10, and that'll make it 21. So you can understand here we're aggressive and we're doubling down. We expect to take only one more hit, and we want more money on the table because we actually are in the driver's seat. So an easy way to remember 10 and 11 is we're going to double if our total is greater than the dealer's up card. And then with a 9, we're going to double 3 through 6. With regard to soft totals, 19 or more is good enough. We're going to stand. And 18 is a special case. So let me drop down to 17. So with 17, if the dealer shows weakness, 3 through 6, we're going to double. Remember, a soft 17, we cannot bust on our next hit. Ace counts as an 11 right now. And if we cannot double, for example, we got a 3-card total soft 17, we're just going to go ahead and hit. And the same is true down below. The way I remember this matrix is it's kind of an upside down triangle. So a soft 13 or 14, I'm going to double against a 5, 6. A 15 or 16, I'm going to double against a 4, 5, 6. And at 17 or 18, I'm going to double against a 3, 4, 5, 6. Note that 18 is kind of special. I stand against a 2, I double against a 3 through 6, I stand against a 7 or 8, but then I go ahead and hit against a 9 through ace. And if I'm not able to double, so for example, I have a ace, 2, 5, 3-card soft 18, and I'm not allowed to double on 3 cards at this particular casino, then I'm going to stand instead. And so this is kind of a deep dive into this basic strategy. You do have to memorize this, but understanding the difference between a dealer up card of 2 through 6 and 7 or through ace will help you understand this section. The doubling can be memorized with a couple simple rules. With 10 or 11, you double if your up card is greater than the dealer. Otherwise, a 9 is 3 through 6. And then down below here, it might help you to remember this upside down triangle. And again, that you're doubling against weak dealer up cards here. The splitting is a little more difficult. Aces and eights should always be split. Nines or less, the rule is 9 or less except a 7. And the way you might remember that is a pair of 9s is 18. And against a 7, it's already a winning hand. So you just stand. Against a 10 or ace, you've got to stand because splitting is too aggressive because the dealer shows strength, and hitting is too risky because you're already in an 18. And then the rest of the pairs, the 7, 6, 3, and 2, you're generally going to be splitting against weak dealer up cards. Notice that you never split 10s, 4s, or 5s. Well, let's go ahead and play a few hands of blackjack using the basic strategy. If you wish, you can print it out and follow along. I'm going to give some color commentary as we play here. And let's go ahead and see how we do. So we're going to go ahead and bet 3 hands at $10.
18.
With an 18, we're going to go ahead and stand.
13.
13, we got to see what the dealer's got cooking. With a 4 up, that shows weakness, so we're going to stand.
20.
And we're quite happy with a 20.
Player
Dealer busted,
wins.
so we won all 3 hands.
Place your bets, please.
Let's go ahead and play another round.
15.
So again, the dealer's showing weakness with a 5 up. And I've got a soft 15. So a soft 15 against a 5, she's showing weakness, and I've got a soft hand. I'm going to be aggressive here and double for the basic strategy.
16.
Not what I wanted. I was actually hoping for a 5 or a 6, but she's still showing weakness, so we still got a chance of winning this hand. 16, same idea. I'm on a double.
12.
And with a 12, I've got 6s, a pair of 6s, and I'm going to go ahead and split 6s against a 3 through 6. So here we're going to split.
13.
13 because of the weak up card I'm standing.
17.
And a 7 or 17, I'm going to go ahead and double again. Oh, she drew to a 21 and really wiped out all of my bets. And that happens sometimes in blackjack, and you have to be prepared for that. You've made the correct strategic plays in terms of what the basic strategy is to maximize your expected value. But the turn of the cards can still make a difference, does make a difference in terms of your outcome.
7.
All right, I've got a 7. Dealer's showing weakness.
17.
17 is I'm going to stand.
11.
On an 11, I'm going to go ahead and double down.
15.
That's correct. And on a 15, I'm just going to stand.
Push. Place your bets, please.
Right. Dealer's got an
Insurance.
ace up. Against an ace up, basic strategy is you never take insurance.
Checking for blackjack. 13.
She doesn't have it, which is good. But we've got a hit now because she's showing strength with this ace.
16.
16 still got a hit.
Bust. 15.
And 15, we got to hit that
Bust.
too. Oh, we busted 2, but we got a 21 on the other one.
Player wins.
So we won 1 of 3
Place your
that
bets,
time.
please. 14.
This time the dealer's showing weakness. So 14, we're going to stand.
19.
Stand on the
16.
19, stand on the 16. And dealer
Player
busted.
wins.
Excellent.
Place your bets, please.
All right, let's do one last round. Dealer showing weakness
17.
again. So we're going to stand.
12.
12 against a 4, you might be tempted to hit, but it's correct here to stand against a 4.
19.
And a 19, we're going to stand. Oh, and the
Place
dealer
your
beat
bets,
us on all
please.
3 hands. So what I like to do for basic strategy is obviously you need to know what your total is, but also the dealer's up card matters a lot in terms of what you'll be doing. If the dealer shows weakness of 2 through 6, you're going to tend to be aggressive both in splitting and doubling. And you're going to tend to not hit hands that you might bust because the dealer shows weakness, so let her bust or him bust. On the other hand, if the dealer shows strength of 7 through ace, you're going to have to be more aggressive in hitting your stiff totals, and you're going to have to be less aggressive generally when you double and you split. Okay, so I wanted to chat with you as well about rule change effects on the basic strategy expectation. So we're going to start with a baseline. We're going to assume a single deck game where the naturals pay 3 to 2. We can double down on any first 2 cards only. There's 1 card on split aces, and the dealer stands on soft 17, and no surrenders offered. And as you might expect, I mean, there's a number of baseline rules here, and because they're listed as baseline, you might expect that some of these may vary from casino to casino, and you would be right. If you're a basic strategy player, your baseline expectation is actually right around 0.0% with this set of rules. I put a negative here because it's actually slightly below 0, but it rounds to 0.0. And here are some common rules that you might encounter and what that does to your expectation as a player. So for example, 6 or 8 decks is going to cost you 0.5% in terms of pricing. If the casino only pays 6 to 5 instead of 3 to 2, that's going to cost you another 1.4%. If the dealer hits off 17, that's going to cost you about 0.2%. And you can see the rest of these here. And the idea is that you start with your baseline and you just add the effects in. So let's do one example. If I were to sit down at a game that was 8 decks, had naturals pay 6 to 5, and the dealer hits off 17, I would add these 3 values here, the minus 0.5%, the minus 1.4%, and the minus 0.2%. And I would get a total of minus 2.1%. And that would be the offset from my baseline, which is 0. So I would be playing a game where my expectation was about minus 2.1%. So the house advantage is about plus 2.1%. And you can see that it pays to find games in particular that pay 3 to 2. And if you can find games that pay 3 to 2 that are 1 or 2 decks, that is usually a good game to play. And remember, to be a good basic strategy player, you need to make the correct play. So you need to memorize that chart. And I think it helps to understand conceptually why things are happening in that chart. That will help you memorize it. You need to make the correct play each and every time you're given a particular situation of your total and the dealer's up card. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I enjoyed making it. Have a great day.